There's a version of respect that doesn't ask for itself. It doesn't arrive with a raised voice or a carefully crafted argument. It enters the room before you finish your first sentence, sometimes before you say anything at all. And most men never figure out what it actually looks like. Because they're looking in the wrong places. They're trying to earn respect through persuasion, through how much they know, how much they've done, how many times they can get someone to agree with them. And then they're confused when people who say less, who argue less, who seem almost indifferent to being impressive, those are the ones people instinctively defer to. What you're about to hear isn't about dominating rooms or performing confidence. It's about 5 silent behaviors, things that communicate something deep about who you are without requiring a single word of explanation. The first one is the unhurried pause. Most men, when asked a question, especially when they're in front of others, answer immediately, almost reflexively, like silence is a weakness they need to cover up fast. And the problem isn't that they don't have something smart to say, the problem is the urgency itself. It signals that external pressure is running their internal clock. Watch what happens when a man takes a breath before responding, not because he doesn't know the answer, because he's decided the answer deserves a moment before it's delivered. That pause, 2-3 seconds of complete stillness, does something specific to the people watching. It tells them he's not afraid of silence. And a man who isn't afraid of silence is rarely afraid of much else. Epictetus wrote that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. But I take it further. The real discipline isn't just in listening more, it's in not flinching when the room goes quiet around you. Your comfort with silence is not emptiness, it's gravity. The second behavior is the economy of words. There's a particular kind of man who walks into a conversation and starts filling it, every thought, every qualifier, every backstory attached to the main point. And people nod politely, waiting for the actual message to arrive. By the time it does, they've mentally moved on. Contrast that with a man who says exactly what needs to be said and then stops. No hedging, no circling back to make sure you understood. He says it once, clearly, and lets it land. Words are currency. The more you flood the market, the less each one is worth. When you develop the discipline to say less, not because you have nothing to offer, but because you trust your own clarity, people start leaning in. They start wondering what you're holding back. And that curiosity, that's a form of respect they gave you without being asked. Marcus Aurelius spent the last years of his reign as Emperor of Rome writing not for an audience, but for himself. Private notes on discipline and restraint that were never meant to be published. A man who has nothing to prove to the room writes like that. He's already had the conversation that matters. The third behavior, stillness under pressure. You've probably been in a situation where someone pushed back hard, maybe publicly, maybe in a tone that was designed to rattle you. And you felt it. Your chest tightened, your jaw set, and everything in you wanted to match their energy, to show them you weren't going to be talked to like that. Here's what most men do. They escalate, or they visibly absorb the hit, the slight tensing, the forced smile, the shift in posture that tells everyone watching exactly how much that landed. The man who commands the room doesn't do either. He stays still, not frozen, still. His breathing doesn't change. His hands don't move. He looks at the person who just came at him with something close to curiosity, not combat. And then he responds in the same measured tone he was using before. That stillness isn't passive. It's the most intentional thing in the room. Because when someone throws disruption at you and your inner world doesn't ripple, you communicate something they can't argue with, that their power over you is non-existent. They handed you a test. You didn't take it. Your body is always giving a verdict. Make sure it's the one you intended. The fourth behavior is the controlled exit. This one is underestimated, almost completely overlooked. Most men think authority is demonstrated by how long you hold court, how long people listen to you, follow the thread of what you're saying, stay in orbit around your presence, and that's partially true. But there's a specific kind of power in knowing when to leave. Not storming out, not checking your phone to manufacture urgency. Simply deciding the conversation has reached its natural conclusion and walking away from it before anyone else does. Think about a conversation that's gone a few minutes past useful, but you can feel it. The energy has thinned out, people are circling the same points, the momentum is gone. Most people stay anyway, worried that leaving feels rude or dismissive, so they let the interaction drag until it dies on its own. The man who ends it, cleanly, warmly, without drama, resets the entire interaction in everyone's memory. They'll remember the beginning and the ending. The middle fades. And what they're left with is the impression of someone whose time has weight to it. Someone who didn't need to squeeze every last drop from a conversation to feel okay about leaving. Your exit is part of your entrance. Plan it. The fifth behavior, and in some ways the most powerful, is protecting what you don't say. We live in a culture that mistakes transparency for authenticity, that values the man who shares everything, his frustrations, his plans, his doubts, his wins, his opinions on everything, because it reads as honesty. But there's a difference between being honest and being an open book. One is a virtue, the other is a vulnerability. When you share your goals before you've reached them, you hand strangers permission to weigh in on something that's still being built. When you explain your decisions to people who didn't ask, you're seeking approval you don't actually need. When you give away your emotional state every time someone asks how you're doing, you've handed them a map to use against you later. This isn't about being cold or secretive. It's about recognizing that your interior life is yours. The work you're doing on yourself, the plans you're carrying, the things you've been through. These are not performances for a crowd. They're the private architecture of who you're becoming. Seneca wrote that one of the first signs of a settled mind is the ability to stay in one place, within yourself, without needing to broadcast that to anyone. The quietest man in the room often carries the most, not because he's hiding it, because he doesn't need you to know. These 5 behaviors share something in common. None of them require you to overpower anyone. None of them require volume or aggression or a carefully constructed image. They ask something much harder: consistency. The slow, deliberate work of becoming a man whose presence speaks before his reputation does. The pause that doesn't apologize for itself. The words that don't beg to be understood. The stillness that doesn't flinch. The exit that doesn't drag. The silence that protects something worth protecting. When you operate from this place long enough, something shifts in how people relate to you. Not because you've performed anything, because something in your manner signals to them instinctively, without explanation, that you're not running the same anxious program everyone else is running. And that's rare enough to be magnetic. Comment the word anchor below if this hits something real for you. It helps me understand what actually resonates, and it tells me to keep going with content like this. The world notices what you guard. Guard it well.